I opened the door to find my wife in bed with my best friend and his wife, laughing at my disbelief. Fired from my job for being too responsible, I soon uncovered their plot to ruin me and steal my life savings. Betrayed and desperate, I fled. But now they're hunting me down, determined to silence me. This is my story of deception, betrayal, and the fight for survival against those who tried to destroy me. Kelly Free was taught to believe that good and bad things happened in groups of 3. If something bad happened, 2 more would follow. If a 4th bad thing happened quickly, then 2 more would come soon. Good things rarely came in 3s, but old sayings are just that. Kelly did believe in the rule of 3s for bad things. The first bad thing happened late one afternoon. He worked for a property management company in a big community in Missouri. He had worked there since before marrying his wife, Megan, 6 years ago. He was good at finding commercial properties and earned nice commissions. His boss, Jerry Myers, didn't like Kelly's lifestyle. While others on the team spent their commissions freely, Kelly saved his and lived on his salary. The others drove fancy cars like Mercedes and Lexus. Kelly drove a 10-year-old pickup truck. The other team members lived in expensive houses in gated communities. Kelly and Megan lived in a nice 2-story home with 3 bedrooms in a good part of town. The others joined country clubs, but Kelly went to the local YMCA for workouts. Every performance review ended with Jerry telling Kelly to live more like his coworkers. Kelly would smile and nod, saying he would try, but he stuck to his way of living. He had plans for retirement and wanted to save as much as possible. On this Friday afternoon, Jerry was upset. He called each team member into his office one by one. The office was buzzing with talk about the recent economic downturn. Businesses weren't expanding and were laying off workers, which meant less work for the property management sales team. When it was Kelly's turn, Jerry was direct. "We have to cut costs, and I have to lay off some office staff and sales team members." Jerry said the rental properties were bringing in the most money, and the sales team had nothing to do with that. He asked Kelly why he should keep him over others. Kelly mentioned his success in finding specialized properties and the business he still brought in during the downturn. Jerry agreed, but said that Kelly's savings meant he could manage longer without a job compared to his coworkers, who had less savings. Kelly was shocked. "Because I save money and don't waste it, I should be let go over others who will just lose their toys, even if they stay employed." Jerry got very red in the face. He was overweight and rumored to have high blood pressure. He looked like he might have a stroke. "I told you to live up to your income. You embarrass us when we close deals. Big clients aren't impressed by you. You look and dress like a small-town hick. We could lose sales because of you instead of closing deals." Jerry wiped his mouth and continued, "I care about all of you, and it's hard to lay anyone off. But I can't put someone else into bankruptcy while you can afford to be out of work for a while. Clean out your desk." Kelly stood up. His parents had always told him to save, and now it would pay off. With 8 years of savings and investment dividends, he had almost $3 million. Most of his coworkers had only a few thousand saved. He didn't need to work if he didn't want to, but he enjoyed finding properties for companies. He didn't say goodbye to Jerry. He went to his cubicle and started packing. There wasn't much personal stuff. The computer belonged to the company. He smiled about the work he was leaving. He saved his last proposal for a shipping company to his personal drive and removed all traces from the company's system. Jerry didn't know the shipping company had contacted him directly for a new distribution center location. Kelly didn't erase his other work out of spite. He was better than that. Soon he was packed and leaving. None of his coworkers looked up as he left. "Oh well," he thought. "I've always been the outsider." He wished them well, but felt the company wouldn't survive if the economy stayed bad. He put his stuff in his old pickup and drove home. He needed to sit down with Megan to talk about their income. He didn't want to use their savings unless it was necessary. As he drove, he thought about the good and bad points of their situation. On the positive side, their house payment was low, because they bought the home when interest rates were almost the lowest in recent history. He could cancel the YMCA membership and just jog to stay in shape. A cheap set of weights would be enough for the rest of his workouts. Kelly already mowed his own yard and took care of the landscaping. He had resisted Megan's wish for a backyard pond because of the extra work and cost. He also did most of the grocery shopping and housework, letting Megan focus on her job and career. He thought this was what modern women wanted, men helping around the house and not sticking to traditional gender roles. It took a lot of extra time, but Megan always seemed to appreciate his efforts. Megan had a good job at a local printing company, and it was unlikely she would be laid off. She could jog with him to stay in shape. They hadn't decided to start a family yet, so their insurance needs were minimal. He even thought this might be a good time to get her pregnant since he was unemployed and had more free time. He smiled at the thought of having more time for lovemaking. They had missed many opportunities for intimacy due to his frequent travel. Their vehicles were paid off, so they only needed maintenance. His pickup was older but in good shape, and Megan's car was only 5 years old. They had just finished paying for it, and it was chosen for its low maintenance costs. Megan could also add him to her insurance if needed, and if she got pregnant, the baby would be covered. This economic downturn might be the push he needed to become a freelancer. He was smiling as he pulled into their driveway, but there was a car blocking his side of the garage. He stopped and realized it was their friend's new car. Mary and Mark Brooks had traded their old car a few weeks ago, and Kelly hadn't gotten used to their new one yet. At least Mary was visiting. He would have to wait to tell Megan about losing his job. He got out, grabbed the box with his things, and went into the house. It was early spring in Missouri, with daytime temperatures in the 50s if the sun was shining. But today was chilly. He didn't expect to find his lovely blonde wife and their guests on the back patio, but he was surprised not to see them in the living room or kitchen. There was no basement since the soil was rocky in this area. He set the box on the table and headed upstairs to the bedroom. At the top of the stairs, he heard soft moans. He trusted Megan completely and never doubted her fidelity until he reached the door to their bedroom. What he saw next shattered him. Many thoughts raced through his mind. He remembered meeting Megan at a party thrown by mutual friends 8 or 9 years ago. He was drawn to her blonde hair, blue eyes, and fantastic smile. Her outgoing nature contrasted with his quiet demeanor, drawing him in. She had a lithe, toned body with a heart-shaped rear and long, lean legs. They hit it off and started dating the next night. Both were in their mid-20s then. They had learned not to jump into bed right away and got to know each other well before having sex. When they finally did, it felt like they had never experienced sex before. Being in love and committed to each other made it more than just sex. It was lovemaking. They had never regretted it until today. Now Kelly saw his former friend Mark Brooks, a tall, brown-haired man, involved in something he never imagined. Kelly and Megan had discussed fantasies, but he always thought of them as just fantasies, not something to pursue. He believed he only needed Megan and no one else. Obviously, she felt differently. Kelly didn't know how long he stood there, frozen, until Mary opened her eyes and screamed in pleasure. His mind was in turmoil. Should he scream, attack, fall to the floor, cry, puke, or run, or all of the above? He remained frozen, but noticed Mary didn't seem surprised or upset that he had caught them. Instead, she smiled and beckoned him closer. He didn't move. Mary then tapped Megan on the head. "Kelly is here," she said. Megan immediately turned to him. His confusion deepened as Megan greeted him with, "Hi, dear, we're glad you got here in time." Mark looked at Kelly, grinned, and got off the bed. He didn't seem at all upset that Kelly had interrupted them. Megan got up, covered in hickeys and bite marks. "We're so happy you're here. Mary, Mark, and I have been waiting for you to start, but we couldn't wait any longer, so we started without you. But now you can join us." Kelly struggled to understand what she was saying. When had he ever hinted at wanting to swing? What had he said, even in the heat of passion, that suggested he wanted to be with Mary while Megan was with Mark? And why did they think he would be home so early today? That last unspoken question really puzzled him. As Mark and Megan came closer, Kelly stepped back from the doorway into the hall. Megan kept talking. "This is going to be so fantastic! All of us having sex together, isn't this great?" Kelly backed further down the hall as they approached. Megan reached out and grabbed Kelly's hands. "Baby, come back to the bedroom and join us. We got a quick start, but you'll catch up quickly." Kelly shook his head. His hands were limp in her grasp. He looked down past the marks on her body to their hands. He had to do something quickly, but his mind was foggy. Losing his job and coming home to find his wife with their friends was almost too much to handle. He shook his head and finally managed to speak. I need to go. I need to get something. Please. He pulled his hands away from the woman he had planned to spend his life with. Please wait here while I get something I need. Megan looked at him, concerned. There was something wrong, but she was too caught up in the moment to realize Kelly was not willing. Mark tried to reach out and take Kelly's hand, but Kelly shook him off. No, wait here. Let me get something I need right now. Later, they would realize he never said he would return. Kelly backed down the stairs and went to the kitchen. He paused to figure out what to do next. Finally, he went to the small office off the living room and grabbed his tablet, laptop, chargers, and phone, then went out to his pickup. He sat in the driver's seat for a few moments before putting the key in the ignition. Somehow, he knew that starting the truck would mean a chapter in his life was over. His truck was not quiet, so when he started the engine, he had to be ready to drive away. No hesitation. He put his head against the steering wheel for a moment before deciding to leave and give himself time to make any final plans. He turned the key and the engine roared to life. He looked at the front door as he put the transmission into reverse and wasn't surprised to see Megan running out in her robe. Kelly didn't slow down or stop. He backed into the street, put the transmission into drive, and headed away. As he glanced into the mirror, he saw Megan come all the way to the street, trying to keep him from leaving. He looked forward again. He couldn't dwell on this right now. He drove aimlessly around the city for a while before finding himself heading west out of the city on a 4-lane highway. What the hell? He thought. I might as well just drive. Driving let him avoid making any real decisions, but it didn't stop him from thinking and remembering. He thought about how he felt when he started dating Megan. The feelings were strong that she was the one he wanted to marry and have children with. He loved her smile, hair, eyes, and that she was just a little shorter than him at 5'6". They had great conversations about politics, religion, children, and current events. They shared many traits. Megan had picked out their house, even though she knew Kelly could afford more. She agreed on saving as much as possible. She had never seemed unhappy with their life until today. He couldn't think of any sign or behavior that hinted at her actions today. He drove on autopilot for hours, heading west into Kansas. He didn't make any decisions until his low fuel light came on and the alarm started beeping. He looked around and didn't recognize anything. He must have driven farther than he realized. An exit came up with a sign for a familiar truck stop. He exited and headed for the fuel pumps. Unfortunately, he had to prepay. Right now, he didn't want to leave a paper trail, but this one time might be okay. Megan wouldn't be able to track him from here easily. He used his card, then went inside, used the restroom, grabbed a coffee and snack, and headed back to his pickup. Not wanting Megan to track him further west, he decided to drive north on a 2-lane highway. An hour and a half later, he crossed into Nebraska and kept heading north. Somewhere in the middle of the state, his subconscious took over and he turned northwest again. Around 4 a.m., his fuel light came on and the alarm started ringing again. He was near a small town, so he pulled over to rest. He had been driving for 10 or 12 hours but didn't feel sleepy, just disconnected. He looked around. The town was too small for an all-night convenience store. The only traffic was the occasional train or semi-truck hauling cattle. He saw the name Hyannis on a sign. It seemed familiar, but it took a while to remember it from a summer vacation with his parents when he was 12 or 13. They had come through this area called the Sand Hills of Nebraska. He remembered the green rolling hills that seemed stark and lifeless to him. His dad had tried to tell him about the area, but it had seemed boring at the time. Now, he was back. Why? He didn't know. Somehow he was here. He had shut off the engine when he rolled into town, but it was getting chilly in the truck. He started the engine to warm up, but after a few minutes there was a loud noise from under the hood, and the air cooled immediately. The battery indicator showed something was wrong, so he shut the engine down. Bad news number 3. Kelly found an old jacket from last year's hunting trip behind the seat. It would help keep him warm. Occasionally he got out of the truck and walked around. The night was clear and cold. The stars were brilliant in the sky. It was hard to believe it was the same sky he could see from his house in Missouri. Without light pollution, it was amazing what you could see. Despite the jacket and moving around, morning found Kelly shivering in his pickup. The sun came up, and a few people were seen on the short streets of the small Nebraska town. Kelly saw a cafe down the block, so he walked there. Luckily, it was open for breakfast. He ordered coffee, ham, and eggs. The coffee warmed him up, and the food would help keep him going. After he ate, he asked about someone who could look at his truck. The waitress told him that her boyfriend ran a repair shop and would be happy to check his truck. She called him and then directed Kelly to the shop. Kelly walked there and talked about the repairs needed. Soon, a tow truck was sent to get his truck. The problem was that Kelly only had $100 on him, actually less because of snacks and breakfast. He didn't want to use his credit card or anything that might leave a trail for Megan to find him. He needed space and time to think about her cheating. He asked and was directed to a bank down the block. There he talked to the manager for a few moments, then sat down with his laptop and accessed the public Wi-Fi. He transferred some money to a new account at the local bank. It should be enough to fix his truck. While there, he turned on his cell phone. He usually shut it off when he left work, as Jerry would call and bother his employees at all hours. The phone went through its startup routine, and then the message indicator showed he had multiple texts. A quick check showed most were from Megan and a few from Mark. Some of the later ones were from his mother. He assumed Megan had contacted her with some story, hoping he had contacted her or his dad. He sent a quick reply to his mom, saying Megan and he had a falling out, and he was taking some time to think things through. Kelly also let his mom know he was okay, but stranded far from home. He would call when he could. Kelly then called his attorney. Since it was Saturday, the attorney wasn't in the office. The answering service picked up. Kelly left a message for Lawrence Roberts, his attorney, saying that Megan and he were estranged and that she should have no access to his accounts until a judge decided otherwise. He also wanted Lawrence to move as much money as possible to offshore accounts. An hour later, Kelly got an email reply from Lawrence Roberts. He was sad that Megan and Kelly weren't together, but promised to do what Kelly asked, as long as it was legal. He knew a couple of financial guys who had the right experience. Kelly also asked Lawrence to arrange for $2,000 per month to be transferred from his accounts to Megan's for bills, including the house payment. He wasn't going to live there anymore, but she needed a place to stay. But he had another problem. He assumed Megan would be looking for him. Too much activity in his accounts would give her a place to look, and his pickup was out of service for a few days. He needed a job that would give him money for expenses, but keep him off the grid for a while. He returned to the diner for lunch and thought about the possibilities. There was no large city nearby where he could hide. He could camp, but it was still freezing at night. Besides, the purchases necessary for camping would require money and leave a trail. He could hitchhike away, but he wanted to have his pickup. He didn't want to buy something else right now either. That also required cash movement. Now, he wished he had stayed in his home city for 24 hours and gotten more cash before leaving. Finally, he asked the waitress about any jobs in Hyannis. She laughed a little. "Honey, there are only a few businesses here and there won't be any new jobs in town until late spring. If you want a job, you need to talk to the ranchers. They always need help." He shrugged. "I don't have any skills they might need, or I would check that out. Are you sure no one is hiring here in town?" She shook her head. "Look, hon, I understand getting stranded can be tough. I'm sorry. There just isn't anything for a few more weeks." She left him to attend to another customer. He sat and thought about his options. Finally, he admitted defeat. If he hitchhiked to the small city of North Platte, he wouldn't be able to lose himself in its population of 25,000. Strangers always stood out, especially here in Hyannis. Even if he found a job, it wouldn't pay much, and rent would be a big problem, along with food. He might not even be able to afford to come back and get his truck. The waitress, whose name tag said Tiffany, came back and refilled his coffee. "Look, Tiffany, I've been thinking, do you think a ranch would hire me until I can get back on my feet?" "Well, sugar, you look like you're in good shape. If you're willing to work hard, I know some ranches that might give you a shot. The pay is low, even by my standards, but they give you a place to stay and meals. I don't know how to ride a horse. I mean, I haven't since I was a kid, and that was on a gentle dude ranch in Wyoming. They use pickups and four-wheelers more now. Some ranches don't even have horses anymore." She looked around the small cafe, then smiled and pointed at an overweight man at the other end of the room. "That's Bill Blaze. He owns the Circle Bar out north of town. Let me see if he needs any help right now. He should be calving, and that means a lot of sleepless nights unless he has enough help. Kelly nodded as she went to fill Mr. Blaze's coffee and talk to him. Kelly thought about a book he read as a teen, a Zane Grey novel called The Dude Ranger, where a man from the East came to the West to seek his fortune. Times were harder then, but the man accepted the challenge, adapted, and earned respect. Kelly believed if he kept trying, he could adapt and learn too. He just had to control his temper and accept any challenge. In the book, the hero faced many tricks and attempts to harm him before gaining respect. Kelly knew he might face the same here if he got a job. Tiffany came back and said Mr. Blaze wanted to talk to him. Kelly nodded and walked over to the rancher. As he approached, he tried to read the man. Bill Blaze was large, almost 300 pounds on a 6-foot frame. His thinning brown hair and piercing brown eyes gave him a permanent squint, showing he didn't believe in sunglasses. "Sit down, young man. Please, sit." Kelly took the seat across from the rancher. They sized each other up. Bill seemed about 60, wore plain but practical clothes, and had an open, honest face. His hands were rough and calloused, showing he was used to hard work. Bill looked at Kelly, a man in his mid-30s with sandy hair and blue eyes, not tall at 5'9". He wasn't overweight, but didn't look very muscular either. Bill thought he must be a city man, not used to hard work. He reached across the table and shook Kelly's hand. "My name is Bill Blaze. I own a ranch about 10 miles north of town. What's your name, son?" Kelly introduced himself. He had no reason to hide his name. Bill wouldn't know him or his reputation. The two men talked for a bit. Bill described his ranch, and Kelly explained he had been in real estate until the economic downturn forced a change. Bill nodded. "Yeah, there are good times and bad, just like in ranching. Cattle prices are flat now, just enough to keep me going, but not enough to make the banker happy. I ranch about 15,000 acres. We move herds to keep the grass in shape. Here in the sand hills, we have great grass and plenty of groundwater and small lakes. But if the grass gets eaten down too much, it takes years to come back, and the sand blows away. We're calving now and expect a good increase in the herd, but it's a lot of work. I have a couple of hands at the home place and one at a cabin on another place about 12 miles west of here." Kelly was surprised at the ranch's size, but Bill waved off his look. "That's not unusual here. It takes a lot of grass to raise a cow. We get plenty of rain early on, but not much in late summer. It gets pretty dry. I also have extra grass for hay in early summer, so we can feed or supplement the grass in late summer and all winter." Bill sat back and looked at Kelly. "Tiff says you're looking for a job. What can you do for me?" Kelly knew he had to be honest. "I just left my wife in Missouri after finding her in bed with her best friend and her best friend's husband. She thought I would go along with it. I need to work to pay the bills and not leave a paper trail while my lawyer sorts things out. As for what I can do, I'm open to anything. I haven't ridden a horse in forever, but I can learn. I follow orders until I learn and then can contribute. I'm not against physical labor. In fact, it's probably just what I need right now while I figure out my life." Bill was good at understanding people. He often met folks who wanted to change their lives. Every year, during branding time, people from the city would come to the ranch to experience ranch life. They were inexperienced but eager to help. It was usually a fun time, with only a few complaining about the tough life. Bill got up from his chair, and Kelly did too. Bill extended his hand, and they shook. "Do you have a ride to the ranch, or are you walking?" Kelly blushed a bit. "My pickup is in the shop nearby, so I'm walking." Bill chuckled and patted his back. "No problem. We'll get you to the ranch and figure out your truck later." They got into Bill's big truck and went to the repair shop so Kelly could grab his gear. They also stopped at a small farm store for Kelly to buy work clothes. The ranch was about 10 miles north of town, but it took half an hour to get there. They turned off the highway onto a single-lane road that went 5 or 6 miles east. Bill explained that his ranch bordered the highway, but the house was in the center. There were several pickups, tractors, ATVs, and a couple of side-by-side vehicles near the buildings. There were barns for hay and cows, a large shop, and smaller buildings for machinery. The ranch house was big and old. Bill and his wife Connie lived there. They had no kids and were in their 60s. Bill told Kelly he planned to ranch as long as possible and might sell and move to a larger town like North Platte when he couldn't take care of himself or Connie anymore. There was also a large, double-wide house about 100 yards from the main house. Bill pointed it out as the bunkhouse. Kelly had expected a small cabin with an outhouse, so he was surprised. Bill laughed and said, "People think we live like that old TV show, Green Acres, but we have running water and satellite TV?" They stopped at the bunkhouse and Kelly got his things. Bill asked about more clothing. Kelly said he would manage for now. Bill said, "We'll organize a trip to North Platte or Alliance for supplies in a few days. They have a better selection of work clothes." Kelly nodded, not wanting to seem negative. Before showing Kelly around the bunkhouse, Bill said, "We never talked about pay. I usually pay $2,000 a month. You get free housing and food. There's a fully equipped kitchen here, and I keep separate freezers for each man. You'll have your own key for your food." Bill explained that he once had workers who took others' snacks, so he set up individual refrigerators, freezers, and pantries. He showed Kelly his pantry and freezer. "You can keep drinks, alcohol, or whatever here and in that fridge. Here are your keys. I provide beef, pork, chicken, and turkey. If you don't know how to cook, there's a computer over there for recipes. There's also Wi-Fi. The password is on the monitor." He took Kelly to the hallway. This first room is David Turney's. He likes to be called Butch. Each bedroom has its own bathroom, and there's a common one in the hallway. The second room is Terry Larkin's. He likes to be called Hoss. Your room is the last one. Kelly was surprised at how spacious the room was. There was a double bed, dresser, small desk, and comfy chair. A flat-screen TV and a DVD player were also there. The bathroom had a full tub, shower, and a large vanity. Kelly dropped his bag on the bed. They went back to the hallway, and Bill showed him the linen closet with extra bed linens and blankets. Towels and washcloths were also there. "You probably have your own soap and shampoo, so I don't provide those," Bill said. Kelly nodded. He'd have to get personal care items in town. He told Bill he hadn't grabbed any when he left home. Bill snapped his fingers. "We can help. Connie wants to go to Alliance, a bigger town 70 miles west. She has a sister there and likes to shop. Make a list of what you need, and she'll pick it up." Kelly quickly wrote a list of his needs and gave it to Bill. Bill then introduced Kelly to Connie, his wife. Connie was in her 60s, with a kind smile and a warm personality. She didn't like sunglasses, so she had typical wrinkles around her eyes from squinting in the sunlight. Her hair was shoulder-length and gray. She was friendly and happy to pick up items for Kelly. Bill then introduced Kelly to Butch and Hoss, since Kelly was from Missouri. Butch started calling him Missouri right away. Kelly thought this nickname was better than Show Me, which also indicated where he was from. Kelly realized that proper names weren't necessary for ranch work. He shrugged as Butch began teaching him. They grabbed a UTV and headed to the nearest pasture. Butch explained that most of the herd stayed here for the winter, so the hands could watch the cows and help with any calves. Butch showed Missouri the big round bales of prairie hay near the pasture. The cows had been fed early in the morning and wouldn't be fed again until about 6 p.m. Butch pointed out which cows looked ready to have calves. Every night they found 5 to 10 new calves. Coyotes came closer to the herd at night, trying to grab newborns. The cowboys worked hard to protect the cows and calves. Butch showed Missouri the rifle they used to scare off coyotes. Some ranches got rid of all predators like coyotes and bobcats, but Bill just wanted to keep them away from the herd. The rifle was a .223 caliber, not big enough for deer, but strong enough for coyotes. They circled the herd a few times before going over a low rise so Missouri could shoot the rifle a few times. Since Kelly grew up with weapons, his shooting skills were good enough for Butch. Kelly decided he would apply for a permit and get a handgun the first time he went to a big town with a gun shop. It might be Alliance, Ogallala, or even North Platte. He thought a handgun might be useful around the herd. Butch told him about prairie rattlesnakes, but the weather was still too cold for them to be out of their dens. It was rare for someone to get bitten, but it was still possible. Boots were next on Missouri's list of needed items. They returned through the herd on the way to the ranch and found a cow delivering a calf. Butch stopped at a safe distance, and Missouri watched the birth of a new life. Butch talked about how ranchers and farmers were the first conservationists and cared about the environment since their livelihoods depended on healthy land and animals. Bill even kept horses for herd watching and fence riding to reduce the carbon footprint. When they needed help with haying, they would find ranchers who still used horses instead of machines. After the calf was born, Butch tagged its ear to match its mother and gave it a shot of vitamins and antibiotics to prevent pneumonia. The wet and cool weather could harm a newborn calf. They had to watch the cow closely as she protected her baby. By moving slowly and speaking softly, they were able to put the UTV between them and the cow. Sometimes a calf is too weak, so they carry it in the UTV or on an ATV to the barn. They want the mother to follow. Once the baby is in the barn, they dry it and let the mother in to nurse. Usually the calf stays in the barn for about a day before it is strong enough to go back outside. This calf looked strong and ready to stay with its mother. The young bull walked shakily around the UTV and began nursing. Butch chuckled and said, "That's what we look for right away. Human or bovine, the need to nurse shows strength." Kelly thought about his recent troubles with Megan and felt he wouldn't see human mothers and babies interacting like this anytime soon. He was pleased with what he saw, but sad about his own situation. Butch kept Kelly busy showing him the equipment needed for a ranch of this size. There were no assigned vehicles for each man. They used what was needed and closest. Every vehicle had keys in them. Butch warned Kelly about taking out the keys and locking the doors, which was common in the city. Here, it could be dangerous, exposing someone to extreme weather. Even when they worked in large groups, no one took the keys out of their vehicles. It wasn't unusual for someone to grab the nearest pickup to get something. They all trusted each other to return it in the same condition. Kelly made a mental note to stop taking out the keys when he got out of vehicles. He understood the need to avoid exposure to heat or cold. Butch also gave Kelly an extra coat. Someone had left coats and jackets when they left. Kelly could use any of them, especially at night when it was cold. They would go out at 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock to check the cows, and another group would go out at 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock to do the same. "We don't expect it to get down to freezing tonight, but there might be rain. You'll need something waterproof," Butch said, pausing. "Do you have a hat?" Kelly, also known as Missouri, shook his head. Butch looked surprised, and then found a floppy hat with a 3-inch brim in the closet. "Here, you might want to wash this before wearing it, but it will keep most of the rain off you tonight." Missouri had seen the washer and dryer in the bunkhouse, so he decided to wash the hat, coat, and his current clothes since they were dirty from his last job. "Oh my gosh," he thought. "I was laid off yesterday, drove all night, and have a new job today." He shook his head in amazement. Butch and Hoss showed him how to use the pickup with a bale lift on the flatbed. They backed up to a bale, used the arms to grab it at the center, and lifted it with hydraulics. Butch laughed, remembering when they had to lift small square bales by hand, load them onto a trailer, and then break each one open for the cows. Now they showed Missouri how the bale rolled out of the pickup, leaving a trail of hay for the cows. They repeated this until the bale was gone, then grabbed another one for the bulls. The bulls were kept away from the cows until breeding time. Bill had a dozen bulls and traded some every couple of years to avoid inbreeding. He bred Angus bulls with Angus cows, but sometimes bought black white-faced cows and red Angus cows to change up the herd. He always kept Angus bulls. 3 months after calving, the bulls were let out with the cows again. The next month, Missouri would learn how to check the cows. Any cows not pregnant were sold. Some heifers were kept for the next year. This process maximized the herd's production by weeding out cows that couldn't produce. Some were used for fresh meat. These cows were fed corn for a few weeks before going to the meat locker for processing. This gave the meat its marbling and made it more tender. Bill then brought the meat back to the house for aging before freezing. Missouri learned this made the meat very tender and tasty. Missouri was overwhelmed with all this new knowledge. This life was so different from his old one. These people were very trusting. It was a physical environment, but there were labor-saving devices everywhere. Butch offered to share his food supply until Connie returned from Alliance. Bill expected her back before dark or soon after, depending on her visit with her sister. Missouri thanked Butch and decided to make a meal for them both. He had cooked at least 3 to 4 nights a week with Megan, depending on their schedules. Now, as he made sloppy joes and macaroni and cheese, he wondered how often Megan was really working late or just with her friends, the Brooks. Then a wild thought hit him. Were the Brooks her only lovers? What an idiot I am, he thought. After supper, Butch cleared the table and all the dirty dishes went into the dishwasher, soon joined by Hoss's dishes. Missouri put his clothes in the dryer and they were all done for the evening. Missouri went to his new bedroom and made the bed. He then worked on the last real estate proposal and tried to make a few phone calls, but was disappointed to find little signal on the ranch. The nearest tower was probably in Hyannis. He went outside and found enough signal to make a few calls in the cold evening air. The business contact he was working for wasn't happy about the late call, but understood when Kelly explained his job change. They worked out a few details before Kelly hung up and went back inside to warm up. Kelly saw multiple messages from Megan and missed calls. He deleted them all without reading them, noting only that she was worried. She just wants to know where I am so she can do something, he thought. He wasn't ready to deal with her yet. The money from his savings would cover the house payments and most utilities. Megan could buy her own groceries. Maybe she was moving her lovers into the house. They could save money that way. The Brooks rented an apartment since Mark disliked owning a home. Kelly worked the new requirements into the proposal and set the alarm for 1:30 in the morning. He was going out with Butch at 2 o'clock and then with Hoss at 5 o'clock. As he gained experience in birthing calves, he would start checking on them during the day and night. Butch wanted him to help pull a few calves first. Missouri learned that pulling calves was needed when a cow got too tired or if the calf was breech. Sometimes the calf came out with a leg first, which was the worst case because the calf sometimes had to be killed and dismembered to save the cow. It was part of the learning experience to recognize when a cow was in distress early enough to help turn the calf before birth to reduce problems. The older cows usually had fewer birth problems, except sometimes a prolapsed uterus. The UTV had a kit for those issues. That cow would then be marked to leave the herd later. As luck would have it, Missouri got to help Butch deliver his first calf that night. It was a strange experience. The cow's shadows were in the wrong place. Butch had a headlamp, but Missouri only had a flashlight and couldn't hold it and the calf puller at the same time. The cable had to be put around the calf's hips to avoid too much tension on a leg. Butch told him it was common to dislocate the hip or even pull off a leg. They had to be careful. It was tough because the cow wasn't cooperating. They were lucky this night. The calf came out straight and soon stood up, trying to get to its mother. The cow got up and ate the placenta and umbilical cord. While Butch directed Missouri to tag and vaccinate the newborn, they found a couple of other newborns and quickly tagged and vaccinated them, too. They headed back in and handed over the UTV to Hoss, who was getting ready for his shift. On this cold but dry night, Missouri fell into bed and slept soundly until 4:30 when his next alarm went off. He dragged himself out of bed and bundled up again. It was about 30 degrees outside with a brisk breeze. He learned that people in Sandhills didn't consider wind to be a problem until it was over 20 miles per hour. Anything less was just a breeze. Strong winds sometimes reached 60 to 70 miles per hour. Spring also brought tornado season. The early warning system didn't work well in this sparsely populated area. Hoss and Missouri pulled another calf. This one was stillborn. They took it and the placenta back to the house for disposal. They heard coyotes yipping in the distance. They got a couple of hours of sleep before having a quick breakfast and then feeding the cows and checking for new calves. This became their routine for the rest of the month until almost every cow had given birth. The days became milder, rain came, and the grass greened up. Now started the fence riding. Missouri learned how to saddle a horse and ride. Most of the horses were well trained, but some would try to show who was boss. He fell a few times but learned to get back on. He learned to tighten the cinch so the saddle wouldn't fall off but the horse could still breathe. He also learned to keep his boot out of the stirrup so he could get free if he fell. Being dragged by a runaway horse was not a way he wanted to die. Every day they fed the cows, then saddled up and checked the fences for breaks or sagging barbed wire. Since the cows weren't in the big pasture yet, they noted the breaks and later fixed them with a pickup or UTV, replacing posts or putting up new wire damaged by the winter's cold and wind. Heavy snow also caused some fence damage needing repairs. Whenever they had time, Butch and Hoss helped Missouri improve his roping skills. It was a slow process. Missouri first had to make a real loop with his lariat. He kept trying to figure-8 it. Butch told him that would work for horned animals, but Angus calves had no horns, so he needed a regular loop. He practiced making his loop and then swinging it over his head. After he got that down, it was time to throw the loop. There was a fake calf head on a bucket for practice. Missouri threw from different angles. Sometimes he got the loop on the head, but mostly he missed. Then he had to pull the lariat back, wind it up again, and throw again. His arm was sore by the time practice was over, either because of his teachers or his tormentors. By the end of April, the fences were in good shape, ready for the cows and calves. Missouri got better at roping, but it was decided he would be better at throwing calves when it came to branding. Their ranch would host the branding in mid-May. First, they would go to other ranches to help with branding. Missouri's pickup was fixed, but he decided to store it in town for now. He didn't need it at the ranch, and it could be stored inside, ready when he needed it. Around that time, Bill came and asked to talk to Missouri privately. "Kelly, I just wanted to tell you that your wife will soon know where you are. The state patrol noticed your pickup in town and started asking questions. Someone in your family, likely your wife, reported you missing. There's a new initiative like an Amber Alert for adults to check on their whereabouts and inform family." Kelly nodded, understanding. As much as he hated to think about it, his old life was catching up to him. "The patrol is checking with people in the area. Since you didn't hide who you are, they haven't come knocking yet, but they will soon check on your well-being. You don't have to leave or change anything, but I'm curious why you're here and not talking to your family." Kelly began cautiously, and then spoke more confidently about his former job, his wife, his lifestyle, and her cheating. "Look at it from my standpoint," he said. "I had just been laid off from a job I loved because I had savings and lived within my means. I cleared out my desk and went home to think about what to do next. I had many clients who might hire me as a freelancer, or I could start my own business. But was this the right time to do that? When I got home, I found out my wife was cheating on me and expected me to join in. I had to leave before I lost everything. I drove around the city that first afternoon trying to clear my mind. My boss couldn't have ruined my life more if he had tried. I got on the freeway, headed west, and just kept going. As long as I was moving, I didn't have to think. Once I knew what to do, I could go back and deal with it. But I still didn't know what to do. My lawyer helped move most of my savings to offshore accounts where my wife couldn't reach them. Infidelity isn't a valid reason for divorce anymore, and she'd get at least half of my money. I didn't want her to profit from her behavior. There were tears in my eyes. This place and this job were a blessing. I almost wished I could pay Bill for the therapy he and the boys provided. Working at the ranch was the best therapy I could imagine. I was learning a new way of life and feeling better than I had in years. I slept deeply at night because I was physically tired instead of mentally exhausted. I knew I couldn't hide from her forever, but I wished I could for a while longer. I was surprised she was even looking for me. She had the house, her job, her lovers, just not me. There was no reason for her to search for me unless she wanted my savings. The cars were paid for, and the house was almost paid off. I directed my attorney to deposit $2,000 a month into her account to help maintain her lifestyle. She didn't need me at all. Bill leaned forward. "What will you do if she shows up here?" "I could have her arrested for trespassing. But shouldn't I talk to her and tell her it's over? If it is." I shrugged. "I don't know yet. I haven't decided. Before I go to bed, I try to figure out what to do. I know this is a temporary job, not a career. I don't see myself ever owning a ranch. I might invest in one, but not own or manage it. I really don't know what my future looks like except lonely and bleak." Bill nodded. "Okay, this is what I'll do. The patrol will show up in a couple of days to talk with you in town. They didn't know where you went, but they knew you were still around. We are a close community, and you've been accepted. People have been speculating about your story. After all, you showed up with your Missouri-plated pickup, had a meal at the cafe, and then disappeared. Butch and Hoss don't know much about you and probably don't remember your real name. If they talk, it's about Missouri, not you. Most people won't volunteer information to the cops except the sheriff, and he doesn't care as long as no laws are broken." He leaned back again. If someone from your past shows up, I'll try to give you a heads up on the radio. The business band radio reaches pretty much anywhere on the ranch. It will be up to you how fast you respond. I thanked Bill and went back to work. A few days later, a state patrolman showed up. Bill called me to the ranch house for a talk. I assured the patrolman I was fine. He lectured me on keeping family informed so they wouldn't worry and involve law enforcement. I promised him I would take care of it. I knew my pickup would be watched. I didn't want to see Megan right now. What if she brought Mark and Mary with her? I definitely wouldn't talk to her with them around. I thought about where to go and how to do it. I could buy a new vehicle, but as soon as I registered it, someone could start tracking it. I went back to Bill and made some arrangements with him. He was surprised, but smiled and agreed. I used some money from my personal account to order supplies. About a week later, the brown truck started making regular stops at the ranch. A small pile was accumulating in my room. Every evening, I went through the latest shipment and repacked the supplies. I got my handgun permit and used a trip to Alliance to buy a semi-automatic. He bought a .45 pistol and some ammo. He also got a .223 rifle and scabbard for coyotes, along with more ammo. They started branding the calves. It was hot, dirty, smoky, and smelly work. The experienced workers roped the calves and dragged them to the crew. 2 people handled each calf. One person would grab the calf, throw it on its side, kneel on its neck, and hold the front hooves. The other person, often Missouri, would grab one hind leg and pull back while pushing the other hind leg forward with his foot. This kept the calf still for hormone and antibiotic shots. Then the calf was branded on the right flank. If it was a young bull, it was castrated and made into a steer before rejoining the herd. In the morning, the calves had been separated from the cows. The cows were mooing in one enclosure, and the calves were calling for their mothers in another. They took a lunch break provided by the ranch wives and then continued all afternoon. They moved to another herd and started again. Missouri would sleep on the way back to the Circle Bar, eat a light meal, shower, and wash his clothes. He didn't think about Megan or any other problems before falling into a deep sleep, only to wake up before dawn to start the day again. Some calves kicked and hurt the workers, causing bruises. Many people limped by the end of the day. Missouri found comfort in knowing he wasn't the only one hurting. Occasionally, they found a steer or heifer that had been missed before. These were not thrown on the ground, but put into a portable cradle. The animal's head was locked into a head gate so it couldn't move, allowing for easy branding. Some ranchers preferred calf cradles, but they slowed down the process so most still roped and threw the calves. The calves were growing bigger and heavier, making it harder to throw them. Missouri was getting stronger from the physical work. He was leaner, but more muscular. His hat had an 8-inch brim to shade his face, but he was still getting more tanned. Some workers used sunblock, but it wore off quickly. Finally, branding was over. Everyone took a few days to rest. Then it was time for haying. All the tractors, mowers, rakes, balers, and loaders were ready. Mowers and swathers started as soon as the dew dried. After mowing, rakes collected the hay into rows for baling. Swathers left the hay in windrows, but if the hay got wet, a rake might be needed to turn it over. It was hot, dusty, dry work. The saying, "make hay while the sun shines," was true. Some tractors had air-conditioned cabs, but most were old and didn't have modern conveniences. High school kids helped with the mowers and rakes, while older workers handled the swathers, balers, and loaders. Some hay was stacked, and some was baled, depending on the rancher's preference. Missouri started with the high schoolers on the mower tractor. Then he learned to use the 20-foot rake to move loose hay into windrows for the baler. Soon, the fields were dotted with large, round bales. Some ranchers made large square bales called loaves, which were easier to stack. All the bales would later be moved to the bale yards for winter. It was hard to think about winter while sweating every day. One evening, Bill came to talk to Missouri. "Connie had some visitors today," Bill said. Missouri feared this. "How many?" he asked. Bill held up 3 fingers. 2 women and a man. Only one introduced herself. She said she's your wife and wants you back right away. Connie told her you were working on another ranch and wouldn't be back for a couple of days. Bill looked at Missouri intently. "Are you going through with your plans?" Missouri nodded. "Yes, I'll leave before she comes back. She'll think I'll go for my pickup and will watch for me there. Hopefully she'll leave me alone after that." Bill asked, Do you mean her home or your home? Missouri gave a sad smile. Until today, this was my home. Now I guess I'm homeless. There are still a couple of hours of daylight left. I better get going. He shook hands with Bill, his boss and friend. He didn't say goodbye to Butch or Hoss. Bill would explain everything tomorrow. He quickly stripped his bed and threw the bedding into the washer. He just needed to pack his toiletries and he was ready to leave. He turned off his cell phone since there wouldn't be a signal for a while. Then he went to the corral and sorted out the 2 horses he had bought from Bill. He saddled one and put a halter on the other. He led both back to the bunkhouse and tied them to a tree. Butch came out onto the porch as Missouri put the pack saddle on the second horse and started to lift the panniers into place. "Going someplace, Missouri?" Butch asked. Missouri continued to pack. "Yeah, I gotta see what's over the horizon. It's been nice, but it's time to head out. I'll explain to Bill in the morning why I have to leave so suddenly." Butch nodded. "It's a woman, right?" Missouri nodded. "I thought so. You never seemed interested in going to town on Saturday nights. There aren't many single women around here, but everyone notices if someone isn't chasing what is available. So we figured some woman hurt you and you were still dealing with it." Missouri nodded again. "I just can't face her. Bill said she showed up today, so it's time to go. When I decide what to do, I'll talk to her. Until then, I'll keep moving. Since you're on horseback, which direction are you heading? Think she's watching your truck?" "I don't know which way I'm going yet. And yes, I think she's watching my truck. I'll come back for it later." Missouri finished packing. He settled his gear, mounted the horse, and put his rifle into the scabbard. He had a small holster with his gun at the small of his back. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. He nodded at Butch, turned, and headed north. Missouri got his idea of traveling by horseback from an old Zane Grey novel. In the book, a modern cowboy from the 1930s rode from Hollywood to Wyoming. Even then, it was rare to see someone on horseback, but it was possible to ride for days without seeing anyone. Missouri wasn't planning to go as far as Gray's hero, but he could avoid highways and roads, making it hard for Megan to find him. He had ground cloths, a sleeping bag, a small tent for bad weather, freeze-dried meals, jerky, water, extra water jugs, changes of clothes, and his personal items. His laptop, cell phone, and tablet were well packed. If he needed to rest, he had a solar charger for his electronics. There wasn't much firewood in the sandhills, so he planned to use dried cow dung for heat and cooking. Many small lakes in the valleys meant he could get water easily. In a week, he could be 100 miles away without seeing anyone. North was South Dakota, and west was Wyoming. South and east were more populated, so he wouldn't head that way for now. He planned to make a wide loop around the Circle Bar. His pickup storage fees were paid for a long time, and he could send money to keep it current whenever he found free Wi-Fi at a public library. That first night, he went about 5 miles before stopping. He used a small camp stove to heat a quick meal, then rolled up in his ground cloth and fell asleep. At first light, he got up, checked his horses, moved them to new grazing, made coffee, and had a quick breakfast. After eating, he packed the animals again and was soon off. He figured Megan, if she kept looking for him, would find out he had headed north. He went north a few more miles before heading west. He was still on Circle Bar land, checking range conditions and fences. He could let Bill know about any problems he saw. After a few months of learning the land, he was confident in his location. Early on, the rolling hills had looked the same, making it easy to get lost. Many ranchers and their children had gotten lost on their own property. Most people would laugh, but those who knew better understood the challenge. Missouri knew if he kept going west, he would reach the highway and the edge of the Circle Bar. If there was a gate, he would use it. Otherwise, he had fence pliers to drop the fence, get the horses across, and put it back up. The second night found him 20 miles west of the highway on Lazy K land. This was where Missouri had helped with branding and haying, so he knew the ground. He made camp by a small lake, staying on dry land and using the lake for water. The water was so pure it didn't need purification. He watched out for alkali lakes, which were common in the area. He spent his days and nights resting the horses in old tree belts and traveling 15 to 20 miles on other days. Every night, he checked the horses' hooves to make sure neither was lame. After a week, he saw a ranch house and approached it. As he came into the yard, the rancher came out and called, Light and set, stranger." The man chuckled as Missouri did just that. "Haven't heard anyone say that for 50 or 60 years. "Not many people ride horses around here anymore," the rancher remarked. He looked at Missouri and said, "Got a call the other day from an old friend, Bill Blaze, over at the Circle Bar. He mentioned a drifter might come by needing a job. You must be Missouri." Missouri nodded. The old man, at least 70, held out his hand. "Name's Ronnie Bentley. This is the Double B. I could use some help around here. You interested?" Missouri was surprised that the man knew who he was. His confusion must have shown. Ronnie continued, "Son, you might be miles from the Circle Bar, but around here we all know each other. If not personally, then by reputation. Bill called everyone within 100 miles to let them know you might be passing through. He vouched for you, said anyone who helped you would stay on his good side." Missouri nodded and thanked Ronnie. "No problem. Take care of your horses and come up to the house. Supper will be ready in a few minutes." Missouri did just that. Inside, he met Millie Bentley, who showed him to the bathroom so he could clean up. After a filling supper, she gave him towels and soap so he could shower. They put him up in a guest bedroom for the night. Missouri was up at dawn, as usual. Ronnie was already up, moving slowly due to his arthritis. Millie soon had breakfast ready. After eating, Ronnie showed Missouri around the Double B. It was about 8,000 acres compared to the Circle Bar's 15,000 acres, but still big enough to need help. Missouri fixed some fences and moved large hay bales. He stayed for a week before getting bad news. One hot and sweaty day, Ronnie met him at the yard gate. "Some folks were here earlier. Said they were looking for a guy named Kelly Free. I told them I didn't know the name. I don't think they believed me." Missouri thanked him. "I guess I'll pack up and leave in the morning. Did they say when they'd be back?" "They said they'd been checking up north, so they might head south and then east again. The woman seemed anxious to find this Kelly guy. She should just move on." Missouri went to the barn where his horses and gear were kept. He had been sleeping in the guest room, only bringing a change of clothes and toiletries inside each day. He had a nice mustache and full beard. At the Double B, he shaved his neck but kept the beard and mustache. He used their internet to check on his pickup and emailed Bill Blaze to thank him for letting his neighbors know about his travels. He also emailed his parents to let them know he was okay, but not where he was. The next morning, he had a big breakfast and started to pack. He ordered supplies to be delivered to an address in Gordon, Nebraska that Ronnie had given him. He figured it would take a week to get to Gordon. It would be his first time in a town since leaving the Circle Bar. After leaving the Double B, it rained. Missouri put on his slicker and kept riding. The horses didn't mind, and his packs were waterproof. By the end of the day, they had only made 5 miles because the horses didn't want to walk fast in the rain. He found an old barn and got them inside just as it started to lightning. Inside, he tended to his horses, heated some stew, and ate a hot supper. He hung his wet clothes to dry before rolling up in his ground cloth. It was too hot for his sleeping bag. The next day was bright and clear, so he made good time. At the end of the week, he was outside Gordon, a small town of about 1,600 people. Missouri staked the horses by a stream and walked into town. He visited a store, bought some canned goods, and treated himself to a cold Coca-Cola. He walked back, packed the canned goods, and headed to the address Ronnie had given him. There, he met the homeowner and got his supplies. He packed them too. His final stop was the library, where he caught up on current events and used the internet to send emails. His attorney informed him that Megan was calling daily for information. Lawrence also said Megan never mentioned divorce. His parents were supportive, but wanted him to come home. He replied that he was healing and would contact them soon. He checked the local news from his hometown and saw that property management services had closed. He didn't feel any satisfaction from the business failure. He was just sad that many people had lost their jobs. After some thought, he decided to eat a meal and headed to the local cafe he had passed before. He sat down at a booth and was soon served iced tea and a hot roast beef sandwich. As he ate, he overheard a conversation from the booth behind him. The high backs of the seats provided some privacy, but the 2 people behind him didn't seem worried about being overheard. He didn't know how long they had been there, but he recognized Megan's voice right away. "He's around here, close, I can feel it. I just hope he will stop long enough to talk with me so I can explain what we mean to each other. I need to make him believe me." The other voice, which must have been Mary, was quieter and harder to understand. I think he doesn't want to be found, or at least doesn't want to talk to you. We've been coming here for months and still haven't found him. These people aren't helping. Some might even be telling him where we are so he can keep moving. We've driven these highways so much, we should have seen him hitchhiking by now. I know, but I need to find him and explain. I think he understood that day he caught us. I just didn't prepare him well enough. I should have talked about polyamory before. I thought he was sophisticated enough to accept it. It doesn't mean I love him less. I want to share everything with him, you and Mark, but I need to tell him that in person. He won't answer emails, texts, or calls. Mary snorted. With the poor cell service up here, he might have ditched his phone. This is starting to feel like a quest for the Holy Grail. If he doesn't want to be found, we can't keep coming here. Mark needs to stay home to work, and I have to put in extra time at my job. I don't know how your boss lets you take so much time off. I told her my husband is missing and I need to find him. She's been very patient, but I need to go back to work for a few weeks before coming back to look again. I think he's staying in the Sandhills. He never mentioned this area before. He has no family here and can't be working without a vehicle. Do you think he bought another car and left his truck in Hyannis to confuse us? I don't know, but I don't think so. He hasn't spent much money since he left. After the first few days of fuel receipts, there's been nothing. I only know he's in the area because of the alert I posted with law enforcement. A state patrolman talked with Kelly at the first ranch we checked. I guess the rancher warned Kelly we were looking for him because we didn't get much help there. I can't imagine Kelly doing ranch work. He's an office guy who occasionally travels to look at properties. What makes him think he can work on a ranch? And living so primitively? No internet or proper bathrooms? I couldn't do that. Missouri almost laughed, remembering his own thoughts when he first arrived at the Circle Bar. He had thought ranch life was backward, too. Someone in the cafe was probably overhearing Mary and wouldn't help them find Kelly free. He suddenly realized he was thinking of Kelly as a stranger. Was he going crazy? He needed to reconcile his old self with his new identity as Missouri, but not today. He started listening to the conversation again. Mary, I'm going to check the library. They have internet access, and Kelly will need to send some emails and get answers from his lawyer. I know his passwords, so I can check his email accounts and see if he's online. It might narrow our search if he tells someone, like his parents or lawyer, where he is. I'll track him using his own accounts. Missouri almost pounded the table in frustration. Darn. He had forgotten that Megan knew the passwords to his private and Yahoo accounts. There hadn't been any secrets between them until Megan decided to have multiple partners. He realized he needed to change his passwords as soon as possible. He tried to remember if he or Lawrence had talked about finances in an email or text message. He didn't think so, but he needed to check. Could Megan see if he checked his emails? The two people behind him must have finished eating because they got up and walked past him. They barely glanced at the man with the beard and mustache sitting in the next booth. Missouri finished his coffee leisurely, knowing they didn't recognize him. Megan had always disliked beards and mustaches. He picked up his hat, left a tip, and went to pay the bill. He still had plenty of cash, as he had cashed most of his checks from the Circle Bar, and Ronnie Bentley had paid him in cash. He kept his money hidden in different pockets of his coat, extra pants, and panniers, so it was accessible but not all in one place. He bought some hard candy, remembering that old cowboys loved it on the trail. He also bought a couple of pints of whiskey for medicinal purposes. He quietly returned to his camp, only to find a man going through his bags. Before he could think, Missouri had his gun out and pointed at the intruder. "Hands up!" he shouted. The man froze and slowly stood up. "Turn around, I like to see who I'm talking to." The man turned. It was Mark Brooks, looking pale. Missouri didn't let on that he knew him. "What do you think you're doing?" Missouri demanded. "I'm looking for someone," Mark replied shakily. "Well, you won't find him in my bags. Empty your pockets." "What?" "Empty your pockets or I'll shoot. No jury around here would convict me for shooting a thief." Mark slowly emptied his pockets. Missouri kept his voice low and raspy to avoid being recognized. Once he saw Mark didn't have anything of his, Missouri told him to put his things back and backed him to the edge of the camp. "Why don't you leave this person alone?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Mark started to lower his hands. "He's my friend, and he's hurting. We want him to come home so he can heal." His wife wants to apologize and get him back into her life. She just wants to talk to him face to face. She loves him, and he's been gone for months. Mark then looked closely at Missouri's face. Something must have looked familiar. "What's your name, stranger?" "They call me Missouri," he replied. Mark's suspicions were raised. "Why do they call you Missouri?" "Everyone has to answer to something. Texas is too common, Oklahoma is too long, and Iowa just sounds dumb. Kansas isn't popular here, and Nebraska would be a dumb name here in Nebraska. If I were in Missouri, I'd probably be called something else." "But what's your legal name?" Missouri pulled his gun again. "Asking that can get you hurt badly. For all you know, I'm an escaped felon. Why don't you learn a lesson and go back where you came from before you find something you won't like?" Mark's eyes widened as he saw the gun. He nodded and slowly backed away. After stumbling a couple of times, he turned and started running. He didn't look back. Missouri smiled wryly. Yep, he thought. Now they knew what to call him. Mark wasn't stupid. The disguise had worked for a while, but it wasn't really a disguise. Just an easy way to deal with being away from civilization. Missouri quickly started to break camp. Wherever Mark had parked, he would get there fast. The sheriff or Megan would soon be looking for him. His camp was in trees and scrub brush, so he headed downstream, using the brush and trees to hide. If he could get over the hills, he could hide again. He didn't know how much time he had, so he moved quickly. Breaking camp took only 10 minutes. The horses were ready after their rest, so Missouri let them run down the stream for a couple of miles before circling around Gordon. He needed to contact Lawrence and check if all the tasks were done before he talked to Megan. She wouldn't benefit from this. He navigated various fences but didn't see anyone official. He saw the occasional pickup or car but kept moving, and the locals just waved and continued on their way. By nightfall, he was a few miles west and south of Gordon. He stopped at a farmstead where the owner let him put the horses in a barn and sleep there himself. The owner, a single woman with her widowed mother, invited him for supper. He was surprised by their kindness, but soon learned that the locals were expecting him. Martha, the owner, laughed when he questioned her. "Missouri, everyone around here is looking out for you. When those 3 idiots came to town, no one told them anything. We know who you are, and we hear you're a hard worker. You stay sober, are kind to women, and a friend to anyone who needs one. So you're one of us. They'll look and then go home. They come every other weekend or so asking questions. Most ranches you've visited know you, but no one bothers you. We figure you have your reasons for not talking to her, and that's good enough for us. Maybe someday you'll tell the real story, but the gossip is probably better." He smiled, and then told her his story, starting with his old saying about bad things coming in threes. After hearing it all, she smiled back. "The Lord works in mysterious ways. You think 3 bad things happened, but look closer. First, you lost your job. Your boss didn't appreciate you and pushed you to live too high. Now you're free to do things your way. There are clients who'd be glad to work with you. Second, you found out your wife has no morals. Losing your job that day let you discover that. How long would she have continued without you knowing? She might have planned for that day, or she might have just continued. You got out of a mess that wasn't your fault." Missouri thought about it and started to agree. He was now healthier and more mature than when he worked for Jerry Myers. He was planning farther ahead, even though he seemed to be living day to day on horseback. Third, your truck breaking down in Hyannis. It couldn't have been better if you had planned it. Driving west out of Missouri, turning north to Nebraska, and heading into the sandhills, I believe God was sending you to heal. He wanted you to meet that rancher, to carve and make hay. You needed the change, and he provided it. You really do look different now. Your wife walked right by you without recognizing you. That other idiot in your camp might think it was you, but no one came out to the camp, so either he's afraid of you now or he doubts it was you." She paused before continuing. "You probably look older now. Not wearing sunglasses, you squint against the sunlight. Your beard has some gray hairs. Your hair is shoulder length and curly, unlike when you were an office worker with short, clean-shaven hair. Your voice gets rusty when you don't talk much. Mark wouldn't recognize your voice." Missouri chuckled. "He was very focused on my gun." She laughed. "Oh, everyone will laugh about that. I know I shouldn't tell anyone what you told me, but I'll have to when I'm in town next. That might be tomorrow, as I need to go to the church and do some bookwork." Missouri finally had something to smile about. This lady, at least 60 years old and very large, was funny. and had a great disposition. Her mother could still get around and help out, but she had a sharp demeanor. It was hard to see them as mother and daughter. Missouri stayed there for a couple of days before heading into town again. He camped on the edge of town and walked in to do his business. His first stop was the library, where he used the Wi-Fi to set up a new email account and contacted Lawrence Roberts. He called Lawrence's office on his cell phone and gave him the new email address to ensure emails from Missouri wouldn't go to spam. Lawrence assured him that the money had been transferred out of the country and Megan couldn't access it. However, he warned Missouri that the courts could demand an accounting of all funds and order him to give up at least 50% in a final decree. Missouri asked, "What happens if I never file for divorce?" "Megan can file for divorce, citing abandonment. There would still be an accounting of assets for distribution." "But what if she can't find me to serve me?" "She'll still get a judgment against you for whatever the court decides. I can represent you in absentia, but judges don't like that and will penalize you for not appearing," Lawrence said. "Face it, Kelly, the courts are against men in these cases. In the past, men often got the lion's share of assets while their wives and children suffered. Now, courts favor women. They assume the man earns more, which was true for you until you lost your job. Her attorney will argue you only gave her a small part of what she deserved, and the court will likely agree and punish you for leaving her." Missouri countered, "Since I've established residency here, can we file here and have a local court hear my case against her?" "No. Your marriage and most of your married life were in Missouri, so it should be heard by a local court and judge. If you could get her to establish residency where you are, then you might get a better judgment. For now, it's best to leave things as they are. I'll start moving again. There's a lot of area to travel and many square miles for her to search. I'll contact you again when I can." A few days later, Missouri walked into town to a convenience store and bought a pay-as-you-go phone so he could keep his regular phone off and the battery out in case Megan could track him. Back at camp, he found a good signal and decided to call Megan. First, he tried the house but realized it was still early, so she might be at work. He remembered her work number and called it. He got the switchboard and was put through to her extension. She picked up on the second ring. "Hello, this is Megan Free. How may I help you?" "I'm surprised you're still using my name. Why not the name of your other family, the Brooks?" "Who is this? Is this some kind of prank call? I'm not laughing." "What? You don't recognize your own husband? Has Mark been whispering in your ear so much you can't believe it's me? I'm surprised you're at work instead of with your friends. Did you get a promotion to rate a separate extension number?" "Is this really you, Kelly? This isn't a prank, right? Why would anyone call and pretend to be me? We are small potatoes in the scheme of things. Every time we come to Nebraska, I leave my numbers with people in case someone sees you. Most calls lead us on a wild goose chase, but sometimes someone says it's my Kelly. The first few times I fell for the joke. I hate those people. This isn't your phone number. What's going on? I'm not using my phone so you can't track me. I want you to stop looking for me. I don't want to see you, talk to you, or have any dealings with you or your friends. Leave me alone. File for divorce. The court will give you half of everything, and I'll direct my attorney to make it available to you. Just forget you ever met me. Take back your maiden name or the Brooks name." "But Kelly, honey, I love you and miss you. Please come home or meet me so I can show you how I feel." "Yeah, you love me so much you cheat with our best friends and expect me to be okay with leftovers. How long were you going to keep it up behind my back? Please don't lie. I came home early that day and you had no idea I was coming. I was trying to introduce the idea of polyamory, but I was afraid of how you'd take it. I guess I was right. You didn't take it well." "No kidding. What gave you that idea?" "It doesn't matter. I don't care. Your excuses mean nothing. Just leave me alone." There was silence for a moment. Missouri was about to hang up when Megan started to talk again, but she was crying and hard to understand. "I love you and miss you. I want you back home in my bed. Please don't hang up." "Why do you want me back?" Missouri replied. "I send you $2,000 a month to help with expenses. With your promotion, you should be making more money. You have 2 people who would move in and keep you warm at night. You enjoy being with them. You don't need me, especially the way I am now." No, you don't understand," Megan pleaded. "I love Mary and Mark, but I'm in love with you. They never replaced you. We don't share the connection you and I have. Mark and Mary don't share dreams like we did. I need that back." Missouri snorted. "Not going to happen. I don't dream about you. I go weeks without thinking about you except to wonder if we'll accidentally meet. I'm still deciding if I'll walk away, slap you, or do something worse." "What do you mean by something worse?" Megan asked, her voice trembling. In the old days, an adulterous woman and her lovers could be killed, and the court wouldn't care. Around here, some people still believe in that kind of justice. Others think you're a fool and should stay in the city where fools are more tolerated. I won't know how I'll react until we're face to face. You've been warned." Megan started to cry, and there was some background noise. She covered the handset, but Missouri heard her tell someone she was all right and just trying to talk to her husband. When she returned to the phone, she was talking to dead air. Missouri had hung up. He wasn't being very polite, he thought, as he turned off the phone and prepared his midday meal. He reflected on his comments about how little he thought about her. It was true. He was more concerned about making sure his packs didn't wear on his pack horse. He thought about his next destination, the weather, and how he could help the next rancher he met. He seldom wasted a thought on Megan and their problems, except for how she had disrespected him. Sometimes he tried to imagine reconciling, but those thoughts were becoming rare. More often, he went days, even weeks, without thinking about her. He was still a bit angry that she was trying to see him, but the intense anger he felt that day he found her with Mark and Mary was fading. He no longer felt bewildered and confused. Their marriage was over. If she thought he would accept her cheating and join in, she was wrong. He wasn't some young guy looking for wild parties. He was a middle-aged man who had wanted to raise a family with the love of his life. She turned out to be a different person. Distancing himself from Megan was working. He was getting over her and her actions. Soon, he might just shrug when reminded of what she did and sigh for what might have been. As he finished eating, he thought it was time to file for divorce and take control away from her. There were some delay tactics she could use, but she couldn't stop the divorce from happening. With that thought, he accessed the internet on his phone and sent the appropriate message using the new email account. Soon, it would be done. The next morning, he broke camp early and headed south. He planned to visit Bill and Connie Blaze at the Circle Bar. He was sure they would welcome him back. It was getting late in the season, and he wanted a more permanent situation before the first frost made sleeping outside uncomfortable. After a few days, he was halfway to Hyannis when he saw smoke on the horizon. Damn, a wildfire here could be very dangerous, he thought. He rode closer to find the source of the smoke. As he got nearer, the smoke was dissipating, which meant the fire was out. When he crested a small hill, he saw the remains of a helicopter in a meadow below. The fire seemed to be out, and luckily the green grass hadn't caught fire. He wondered if there were any survivors and rode closer. He saw someone moving near the wreckage, a lone woman dragging something. As he got close enough, he yelled, "Hello, the camp!" Not wanting to startle her, the woman raised her arm and waved him in. "I'm so happy to see someone. We went down yesterday and figured someone would be looking for us by now." Missouri dismounted and dropped the reins. His horses were well trained and wouldn't move unless startled. "Are you the only survivor?" "No, my partner Jane was hurt. She's over there under the shelter. I think she broke her back on impact. The pilot is dead." Missouri guessed this was a medical helicopter. "Where were you heading?" "We were flying from North Platte to Valentine when we had some kind of electrical problem. The pilot tried to land us safely, but the engine stalled and we were too low to the ground. After the crash, I got out and went back for Jane, but I couldn't get to Sam before the fire started. He was unconscious, so I don't think he suffered much." Missouri nodded. "Why were you so far west if you were headed for Valentine?" He pointed northeast. "Valentine is that way, and you're not in a direct line between North Platte and Valentine." "Oh no, that explains why we haven't been found yet. They'll be looking for us further east. Sam didn't trust the GPS after the power surge, but it must have led us this way. The radio went out, and we didn't have time to use the satellite phone before we crashed." "Why not use it now? You should still be able to hit a satellite." "It was in the helicopter when the fire started. I grabbed the survival gear and threw it out before going back for Jane. It was too hot to go back in by then." They reached a small shelter where Missouri could hear the other woman moaning in pain. The first woman shrugged. "I couldn't get the medications, so she's in a lot of pain. I can't move her more or she might have permanent spinal damage. She's the nurse, and I'm the flight paramedic. I've made her as comfortable as I can." Missouri looked around and pulled out his pocket GPS. After studying it, he came up with a plan. There's no cell service here either. I see a ranch house about 10 miles south. Unless there are too many fences, I should be able to get there in a couple of hours and use their phone to get help. I programmed your location into the GPS so they won't have to search much to find you. I'll leave my pack horse here with food, a small cook stove, and a tent if you need it. The paramedic nodded. I wish we could go with you, but it's best if we stay near the helicopter in case the emergency locator starts working. Missouri quickly stripped the packs off his pack horse and staked it out to graze. He then mounted his horse. If you're gone before I get back, tell the others to leave my horse and packs here. I'll come back for them. She nodded. Good luck to you and your partner. I'll get help as soon as I can. With that, he kicked his horse into a fast lope. He and his horse made good time, stopping only to drop a few fences. He reached the ranch a couple of hours later. Thankfully, the rancher was home, and Missouri explained the situation. The rancher called the local authorities. The nearest fire department and ambulance were about 30 minutes away, so the rancher and his hands loaded pickups and UTVs with extra blankets, food, water, and bandages. Using the GPS coordinates, they headed out quickly. Missouri stayed behind to care for his horse. He saw a couple of helicopters fly over, likely one military and one medical. Both were heading towards the crash site. The local sheriff's department must have notified the searchers. Missouri realized he hadn't asked the paramedic's name, but her partner Jane would soon be on her way to a hospital. After resting his horse, he saddled up and returned to retrieve his pack horse and supplies. He repaired the fences as he returned. The fire department and ambulance were at the crash site when he arrived. Larger vehicles stayed clear to avoid disturbing the site, while smaller rigs moved closer. The ambulance also stayed back. He didn't see the rancher and his crew return, and he was the only civilian at the site. The sheriff and deputies were there to secure the area. One of them told Missouri that the pilot's body couldn't be moved until the NTSB arrived. Missouri shook his head but knew it wasn't his concern anymore. He had done what he could. He packed his horse to leave when a man with a badge approached him. You know, in all the excitement, we never asked your name. I bet the investigators will want to know who you are. Are you the guy called Missouri? Missouri nodded. You've probably heard my story. If possible, I'd like to remain just Missouri in the reports. I'm not ready to see my wife yet, so I need to put some miles between here and where I'm heading. Also, could you not tell them which way I am heading? The sheriff nodded. None of the firefighters or EMTs were close enough to hear their conversation. Later, they would all just say they looked up and Missouri was gone over the nearest hill. The sheriff knew Missouri's real name and shared it with the NTSB investigators, but kept it from the news reporters when they arrived. Missouri didn't realize it, but his travels were becoming legendary. Megan and the Brooks kept driving to the area, but everyone they talked to reported seeing Missouri in different places, sometimes miles apart on the same day. Rescues of ranchers and travelers were attributed to him, and people claimed they heard from someone who saw him and his horses. Sometimes he was seen with a clean white hat, like the Lone Ranger. Other times he wore a black hat. His horses also varied. Some witnesses swore he rode a Palomino, while others saw him on a roan or a paint. Every story added to his mythical status. Girls and young women claimed they had helped him when he was down, each giving a secret smile when asked for details. Ranchers where he stayed said he was a true gentleman. His skills as a cowhand were also becoming legendary. Some communities claimed he competed in their local rodeos under an assumed name, winning events like bronc riding, calf roping, and steer wrestling. He was never a bull rider or a bullfighter, and no one explained why. His horses were also part of the legend. Cowboys claimed they rode Missouri's horses in various events. One barrel racer said her horse went lame, and Missouri insisted she ride his horse, which had never raced barrels before, and she won that night. Missouri was close to the Circle Bar when a state patrolman stopped him for a chat. He wasn't speeding on horseback and stayed off the highway. The patrolman waited at a gate for Missouri to come up. He noticed Missouri was now wearing his gun on his hip. Say, son, could you stop for a few moments? I'd like to chat if you don't mind. Missouri hooked his leg over the saddle horn and leaned back. No, I guess not. Don't have to be anywhere soon, just headed down the road. That wouldn't be Bill Blaze's ranch, would it? I hear he's a close friend. I don't know about friends, more like mentor and boss when I first came to the Sandhills. Has it only been 4 or 5 months? Feels longer. Days are getting shorter, nights colder. I hope he needs help this winter. Oh, I don't think that'll be a problem. He told me to let you know you're welcome anytime. Have you talked with your wife? She still calls us for updates. I spoke to her once, told her to file for divorce and get on with her life. I have. Why is she still bothering you? Well, it might have to do with the stories going around. What stories? The patrolman then told Missouri about all the supposed adventures attributed to him. Missouri was amazed and a little confused. In one summer, no man could have done even a fraction of what the patrolman was saying. The patrolman laughed. We all know that, but a little mystery and romance can make stories grow, kind of like those old dime novels about the Old West. Probably wouldn't sell now, Missouri said, but it's funny that there are people on Facebook and Snapchat claiming to be me, arguing about who the real Missouri is. Funny thing is, none of them use my real name. Either they don't know it or keep it quiet to keep the mystery alive. All you need is a black mask, and someone will call you the Lone Ranger. I'd need silver bullets too, Missouri said, touching his beard, and I'd have to be clean-shaven to be the good guy. They both laughed. Soon the patrolman let Missouri go on his way and told his colleagues about their meeting, making the legend grow even more. A day later, Missouri was back at the Circle Bar. He planned to see if Bill needed help for the winter. If so, he'd stay where it was comfortable at night. His roping had improved from practicing on cows and steers during his travels. While he didn't think he was a top hand yet, he had the skills if Bill didn't want him back. Other ranchers, like Ronnie Bentley at the WB, might need help for the winter too. There was little fanfare as he entered the ranch yard. He didn't come in at a high speed like in the old westerns, and he figured someone had seen him before he rode in, so he wasn't expecting to surprise anyone. And he was right. The Blazes and Butch came out of the house as he pulled up. Howdy, stranger. Bet you'd like a good cup of coffee and a comfortable chair after wandering around the hills, Bill said with a grin. Missouri chuckled. Yes, sir. That would be good. Can I let my horses out in your corral? Bill grinned wider. Well, now, I don't know about that. Are you still the same Missouri that rode away from here early summer? Connie gave her husband a playful thump on the head. Missouri, don't mind his jokes. We've got 10,000 comedians out of work, and I'm stuck with him. Come on in after you take care of your horses. Bill and Butch helped Missouri unsaddle the horses, rub them down, and give them some grain before putting them in the corral. They then hauled Missouri's gear to the bunkhouse, where he was happy to find he still had the same room. Horse had moved on, but there was a new young hand. Butch introduced him. Missouri, this is Jesse. I call him Outlaw. He's still wet behind the ears, but we have hopes for him. He turned to the young hand. Outlaw, this is Missouri. Yeah, the real deal, the legend. Young Jesse was tongue-tied, so the handshake was tentative. Missouri just smiled at him. Later, Butch told Missouri that Jesse claimed to be 18, but Bill believed he was actually a 16-year-old runaway. They were checking with the sheriff's department. Until then, they were letting Jesse stay, and Connie was having him come to supper each night. This evening, Connie invited Missouri and Butch over to celebrate Missouri's return. During supper, Missouri shared highlights of his travels, including overhearing his wife and her lover in the cafe in Gordon. Bill and Butch chuckled at his account of running into his former friend Mark. Young Jesse listened with wide eyes. After the meal, the others tried to outdo each other with exaggerated tales about Missouri's exploits, including a story about the medical helicopter rescue. Bill took the floor for that one. According to the latest story on the internet, you came over the last hill at a fast lope, jumped off your horse, and swept up Casey, the young paramedic, as she was swooning from relief. You then built a sod cabin to protect them from a tornado, rode into the storm to get help, climbed a cell phone tower, hacked the system to call for help, used your flashlight to guide the helicopters, and led the ground team back to the site. You even removed the pilot from the wreckage and led a prayer for him. Missouri was flabbergasted. He then told them the true story. He didn't even know the paramedic's name, and the pilot was still in the wreckage when he returned for his pack horse. The stories continued with sightings of Missouri and his horses covering a vast area from O'Neill to Alliance, and even as far north as Moto in South Dakota and as far south as McCook in Nebraska. They laughed at the improbability of a man on horseback covering so much ground in a few months. Connie examined Missouri for injuries, explaining that he was reported to have fought off attackers defending women and girls in every town. All accounts had him handling his foes with ease. It was a great night with old friends and a new one. Outlaw relaxed and started to joke with Missouri like the others. Bill finally asked what Missouri had planned. "Well, I hope you might need me to work this winter. I'm done roaming for a while. If Megan shows up, I'll talk to her and let her know we're through. She can have the house and half my money if she doesn't fight the divorce. If she does, I'll use my story to ruin her and her lovers. It's her choice." Bill and Connie nodded. Bill spoke first. "Of course, you have a job here at the Circle Bar. We need to haul the hay bales back to the ranch for winter feed. With you here, we'll get it done quickly. Then we'll just keep watch over the cows." Connie added, "We've gained some popularity from your travels. The Circle Bar is now considered your home. We get visitors every week looking for you. You have quite a fan club. If it's all right with you, I'd like to be out riding fence when visitors stop by." I wouldn't know what to say to them. Missouri smiled. "Sounds good to me. I wouldn't know what to tell them either, except not to believe everything they hear." We got a couple of phone calls from Casey and her friend Jane. They want to thank you for saving their lives. The emergency locator in the tail section failed to activate and got damaged in the fire. Who knows how long it would have been before they were found. Bill paused. "Will you meet with them if they show up? I don't know when Jane will be released from the hospital. Her injuries were pretty bad, according to the news." Missouri nodded. "Yeah, I'll meet with them." Casey had it all under control when I arrived. She made Jane as comfortable as she could. She used my small tent to protect her and made them both a meal to last until help arrived. By the time I got back, they had been airlifted out, probably to the hospital in North Platte or Kearney. I don't actually know where they went. The firemen and EMTs at the scene weren't sure either. That supper set the tone for Missouri's return to the ranch. Bill had gone into Hyannis and brought back Missouri's pickup. It was being stored in one of the sheds. Missouri set it up to pull a used horse trailer he bought locally. If he needed to travel again, he could take his horses with him, maybe to Wyoming or North Dakota. He drove to Alliance to buy new clothes since his were very worn from his travels. He used an old 3-inch brim hat and trimmed his beard to a goatee with a mustache. No one seemed to recognize him when he went to the stores. That suited him fine. True to his word, Bill sent Missouri out on horseback whenever strangers showed up at the ranch. One question he would ask visitors was about recent sightings of Missouri. They would all laugh as the sightings continued, even though Missouri had hardly left the ranch for weeks. It was now late fall. The days were still warm, but there was a chill in the air. Each night there were frost warnings from the Weather Service. The last of the hay bales were moved from the fields to smaller pastures, where the cows and bulls would spend the winter. Fences always needed checking. Missouri would ride a horse to check them and spend some time roping fence posts for practice. He was getting better all the time. He still carried his .45 on his hip, just in case he met an aggressive coyote or an upset badger. In early November, unwelcome visitors arrived. Megan came with the Brooks to the Circle Bar for the first time since she started her search, and the umpteenth time she came to the ranch. She was invited into the ranch house while Missouri was sent for. The Brooks were told they were not welcome and to stay in the car. They got angry at that, but Butch had a quiet word with them, and suddenly they calmed down. Butch told Bill later that he just mentioned there was a lot of empty space for a couple of lonely graves, and that seemed to quiet them. He brought each of them some water while Megan met with her estranged husband. Connie introduced herself and Bill to Megan and had her sit at the dining room table with a glass of water. They didn't try to talk to her further. To them, Megan was the enemy of their friend and didn't need any polite conversation. Megan waited for about 30 minutes before she heard footsteps from the kitchen area. The man who appeared at the doorway from the kitchen to the dining room was a stranger. He seemed taller than her husband. His hair was longer than Kelly's. This man squinted as though he was used to bright sunlight. He wore a black Western hat with an 8-inch brim to shade his eyes, pulled low on his forehead. This man had a mustache and goatee where her husband was always clean-shaven, even if he had to shave twice a day to keep his face smooth for her. This man barely nodded at her. He placed a glass of water on the table, then sat across from her, leaned back in the chair, and crossed his legs. "Well, Megan, you finally tracked me down. Just so you know, I've decided not to avoid you any longer. We can get this whole thing over with, and you can get on with your life." Megan didn't respond. She was still trying to reconcile this cowboy with her husband. His voice was familiar, but nothing else really screamed that this was Kelly, the man she had been married to for over 6 years. Finally, she extended a hand to Missouri. "Is it really you, Kelly?" He nodded. She looked around and saw Connie peeking around the corner. "Are you trying to pull a fast one on me? Is this some kind of sick joke? I have been searching for my husband for months, and you get some ranch hand to pose as Kelly Free. Do you think I'm a fool? Where is my husband?" Connie shook her head and pointed at Missouri. "That is the man who came to our ranch broken and beaten. He told us his name but never used it again after that day. This is Missouri, formerly known as Kelly Free. He has grown up and matured since you knew him. He has learned and accepted the change in his life. He is a better man than you deserve, and you need to sit and talk to get both your lives straightened out so he can finish healing and you can move on." Megan looked shocked. "I know you don't like me, but how could you do this to me? How do you explain that? You say Kelly is here, but bring in this guy?" She broke down and started to cry. "I need my husband. I need Kelly. Please bring him here. I beg for some kindness. I've been searching for so long." She hid her face in her hands on the table. "Megan, listen to me. How can I say this? I am free from Kelly. I might look different, but I'm still your husband for a bit longer at least. You chose to start something with Mary and Mark Brooks, thinking I'd be okay with it, even join in. I was shocked, upset, and disappointed. I couldn't stay in Missouri, so I drove here and got a job after my truck broke down. I've learned new things, traveled a bit, and now I'm ready to face you." Megan shook her head. This man, this stranger with a beard and wearing a worn black hat, sounded like Kelly, but he seemed taller, more mature, stronger. It couldn't be Kelly, could it? She looked around. Connie Blaze had come in, sat next to her, and was holding her hand, comforting her. Kelly continued, talking about things only the two of them would know from before the trouble started. Missouri took off his hat and placed it on the table. It was hard to believe, but this man was her husband. He looked like he stepped out of a Western movie. She checked for a gun. No old-style revolver, but a modern pistol was there. Kelly saw her looking, took the gun out, and placed it beyond his hat on the table. "I'm sorry you feel unsafe right now. I carry the gun for coyotes and snakes when I'm out riding. It's become so normal I forget to take it off. But why did you leave me? I love you. I left because it seemed I wasn't enough for you. You broke our vows. You took other lovers without talking to me. That hurt me deeply and showed no respect for our marriage. I had to leave to clear my head. I've come to terms with how you treated me. But it was just with Mary and Mark, our friends. Sharing brought us closer, you thought. I felt cheated and sick to find you all together in our home, in our bedroom. I had to leave before I did something regrettable. What do you mean by humiliate yourself? Standing there, watching, I couldn't decide whether to break down crying or run away to throw up, or whether I should confront you all for ruining our marriage. When you approached me, I was so repulsed, all I could do was leave right away. So I left. You seem to not understand how much you hurt me." He continued. "I drove around for hours, then headed west. I ended up here in Hyannis, forced to face what you did. Our marriage was done then. I wasn't ready to face you, so I took a job at the Circle Bar Ranch. The people here didn't have to welcome me, but they did. They taught me how to be a ranch hand and treated me with respect, never judging my personal issues." Connie nodded along with Missouri's words. They had been there for him more than he knew. Bill or Butch were often nearby, ready to help if needed, and proud he was managing on his own. He had grown into the kind of man heroes in stories are made of. He was accepted wherever he went. He was a strong, respected man now. She thought about his old boss. What was his name? Jerry? Terry? She was sure his old boss would think twice before judging Missouri now. He had the confidence and strength to face anyone if needed. Megan still seemed in denial after being apart so long. She shook her head. This couldn't be happening. All this time she thought Kelly was hurting but would rush back to her when they met. He loved her and needed her. She had convinced herself of this and still thought Kelly would accept her way of life, and she and Mary would win him over, She just needed to get Kelly alone and everything would be fine. Kelly could tell from her face that she was still set on the plan she began last spring in Missouri. He shook his head, unable to make her see that her dreams had become a nightmare for him. There was no fixing this. He tried once more. "Megan, now that you know it's really me, Kelly, let's deal with this. When you get home, you'll find divorce papers. Please just sign them and let it happen. I've been fair. Read them and you'll see the offer is just... You can then move on with the Brooks." She shook her head, not agreeing. "No, I won't accept that. You just need to feel the love we share. Then you'll understand what I've been trying to show you, the thrill of being with two women and the happiness of watching us together. You'll see then." "No, Megan, I won't. It's not for me. You need to leave and not try to see me again. I'll be at the court hearing. If you fight the divorce, I'll tell everyone the full story. Your family and friends will likely shun you, as they don't approve of your lifestyle. The Brooks might even leave you when things get tough. Just sign the papers and live out your fantasy as long as you like." He stood up and stepped back. He was finished talking, even though Megan still tried to justify her choices. As she spoke, trying to stand up but struggling, he noticed her swollen belly for the first time. "So, Mark's good, huh? When are you due? Do your parents know who the father is, or have you lied to them too?" She pointed to her belly. "This is your doing, Kelly. Remember the joy that day when you came home early, when we wanted to tell you you're going to be a dad? I hoped that news would make you accept things, since Mark and Mary were ready to be godparents." He laughed out loud. "Do you expect me to believe this nonsense? That I'd be thrilled to join your mess?" "Missouri," he said at the kitchen door. "When this child is born, we'll get DNA tests. If it's mine, I'll pay support but won't see or claim it. As far as I'm concerned, it isn't my child. You can call me Daddy." Then he walked out, leaving the kitchen. Megan tried to stop him, but only watched as he mounted his horse and rode off from the ranch without looking back. Megan now realized her life had worsened since embracing polyamory. All her plans failed. Kelly wouldn't even acknowledge their unborn child. She had no husband, her job was shaky, and being with the Brooks was no longer satisfying. Both Mary and Mark seemed to be using her for their own pleasure without caring if she was happy. Megan slowly walked back into the dining room where Connie still sat. "He really is my baby's father. Mark had a vasectomy years ago. There hasn't been anyone else since we chose to be exclusive." Connie couldn't help but say, "It sounds like you forgot what exclusive means." Megan slumped into a chair. "I thought it would be good for us, for people to love each other fully without jealousy. Everything I read online made it seem like the best way. The stats say there's less cheating in poly marriages and that most are happy." Connie shook her head. "You can't believe everything online. Even we simple folks know that most cultures stopped having multiple spouses long ago because it didn't work out. I think it's rare for such relationships to work and stay happy. Living with one person is hard enough, let alone several." Megan began to cry quietly. After a moment, she composed herself and looked at Connie. "Tell Kelly I'm going home, but I'll fight for the divorce. His baby needs a father as well as a mother, and that's why I'll fight." She got up and left with her lovers, quickly disappearing. The dust hadn't settled when Missouri returned to the ranch house. Connie told him what Megan had said. He just nodded. He had hoped she'd accept it, but knew deep down she wouldn't go quietly. Life continued. Kelly went back to Missouri for the divorce hearing. Lauren filed all the right motions. Megan responded as she promised. She admitted her mistakes, but told the judge she had ended things with the Brooks. They were still friends, but not lovers. She asked for counseling. The judge took it all in and set another court date in 2 weeks. During the wait, Kelly stayed with his parents. They were amazed by his changes. They were happy for him, but very disappointed in Megan's actions. They had loved her like a daughter, but she became unwelcome after what she did to their son. While waiting, Megan gave birth to a baby girl and named her Kelly. DNA tests showed the baby was Kelly Free's daughter. Kelly's parents forgave Megan a little so they could be involved in their granddaughter's life. Kelly visited the hospital before baby Kelly was discharged. He didn't want to admit it, but she touched his heart. If only Megan hadn't messed up with the Brooks, they would have been happy to have little Kelly in their lives. Now, Kelly would be a distant father. Megan made sure to take little Kelly to see her grandparents almost every day. Kelly always avoided these visits, leaving right after Megan arrived. At the next hearing, the judge made his decision. He said that marital counseling wouldn't help. Mr. Free, also known as Missouri, had started a new life in Nebraska. After reviewing all the evidence, he ruled that 50% of the assets should go to Megan by the end of the next week. Child support was also set, but no alimony since Kelly officially made less money than Megan. The judge set visitation for every Wednesday, every other weekend, and 6 weeks in the summer. Even though Kelly hadn't requested visitation, the judge warned Megan to let Kelly see his daughter at least half of the holidays each year. If Kelly complained about not seeing his daughter, the judge would revisit custody. "I'm tired of adults using children as weapons. Do you understand me?" the judge said. Megan stood up and acknowledged his directive. "Your Honor, I would prefer this divorce not be granted and that my husband come home to me and our daughter, but if he wants the divorce, I won't stop him from seeing our daughter," Megan said. Kelly made no comment to the judge. With a bang of the gavel, the divorce was finalized. Kelly made sure all his assets, including those hidden by his lawyer, were split evenly, so little Kelly would be well taken care of financially. Kelly left for Nebraska the next day. While at his parents' place, he had contacted some of his old clients. They were happy to hear from him and ready to use his new consulting service to find properties. Missouri started his own business and added a twist. He would take his horse, named Leroy after the horse in the song Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy, to scout locations for companies. He spent a couple of weeks riding around the areas, even populated ones. He found that residents loved talking to a man on horseback. In between trips, he worked as a ranch hand again. He enjoyed the manual labor, which gave him time to think and plan. During the winter, when chores were less demanding, he stayed busy feeding the livestock and visiting his family online. He had helped Bill set up a cell phone booster, making video calls easier. He got to know his daughter during these calls as she was often at his parents' house. There was local buzz about strangers coming to Hyannis looking for the legend called Missouri. One day, an out-of-state SUV arrived at the Circle Bar. The people inside were agents for a cable network specializing in cheating spouse movies. They were interested in Missouri's story. They promised to keep his identity anonymous by changing names, dates, and locations. The working title was The Man from Missouri, but Missouri's hometown would be changed. Missouri also had the agents contact Megan for her input and consent, even though it wasn't needed since the story would be fictionalized. Missouri soon had a public relations person and an entertainment lawyer. A corporation was formed, and Missouri became the CEO, with Bill and Connie on the board of directors and the Circle Bar staff as shareholders. The next change came when Megan contacted Missouri about a job. "Kelly, I need you to be more than a face on a screen for your daughter. After the movie, people contacted me. I realized I don't want to live here in Missouri anymore. Your parents and I have talked. We want to relocate. Is there somewhere close to the ranch we can move to so we can all see more of you? I need something to do," Megan said. "Are there any job opportunities nearby?" Kelly was almost speechless. This was an unexpected twist in his life, and not a bad one. "Actually, Megan, I need someone to help Butch with this movie project. I think you might be the right person for the job. Let me get back to you." He got off the phone with Megan and called his parents to share the news. Ideas were tossed around, some discarded, but others expanded into a solid plan. Kelly then went to the village board in Hyannis and presented his idea to build a couple of nice houses on the edge of town. In a small village, new houses were a big deal and could strain the infrastructure. Luckily, the village could handle the increase, and the new construction was approved. Megan started her move right away. Kelly found a small but livable mobile home for her, and soon they settled into their new place. Baby Kelly was soon called Miss Missouri in honor of her father. One of the writers for the movie showed up in an RV and parked at the campground. The movie expanded to include these new developments. Before long, the project grew into a series. The first part would be the original story of cheating and healing. The second part would cover the divorce and redemption. The writer planned to take creative liberties to get the couple back together, possibly for a love story series on another network. They also wanted to include some of the legendary events attributed to Missouri to keep the interest alive. Some even suggested making it an episodic series instead of just a couple of movies. But what about Missouri's love life? He and Megan were done. They became friends and co-parents to Miss Missouri, but that was all. However, Missouri was not destined to be alone. While modular homes were being planned and built for Megan and Missouri's parents, someone new arrived at the ranch. A van drove in one day, and Missouri was in the bunkhouse when the passenger got out. A pretty woman using crutches introduced herself as Jane Gantry. She had come to thank her lifesaver. Her driver was Casey, the paramedic from the helicopter. Missouri usually tried to avoid his fans, but this time he decided to sit and talk with the two women. Jane gushed to Bill and Connie about what a great man Missouri was, and Casey agreed. Bill and Connie grinned at Missouri's discomfort. Finally, Connie asked about Jane's injuries. The crash broke multiple vertebrae in my spine, so it's been a long recovery. I was in a wheelchair for months while undergoing physical therapy. I'm slowly healing and hope to be free of these crutches soon. At the same time, I finished my advanced practice nursing license. I can't fly anymore, so I'm looking for a place to start a clinic. Do you think Hyannis could use some health care? Casey added, I'm working on my nursing license and want to help Jane. I have PTSD from the crash and have been working on a ground transfer ambulance while getting my license. This meeting led to more discussions about opening a clinic. Surveys were needed to assess the demand for medical care in the small community. They had to find or build a suitable clinic building. Missouri was busy helping at the ranch, moving his parents, getting to know his daughter, managing the movie project, planning the clinic, and making site visits for clients. Jane stepped in and made Missouri take a break. She had improved enough to no longer need crutches, but still couldn't stand for long periods. As she healed, their meetings shifted from business to a more personal level. Jane, a 35-year-old who had been hurt by a bad lover in college, had stayed away from men until she met Missouri. Casey had also had trouble with men and avoided them until the crash. Missouri's rescue made him her hero. Jane was the first to see Missouri as more than a hero. She saw him as a man, a friend, and maybe more. Casey warned Jane never to hurt him or face serious consequences. Jane convinced Missouri to take a break. It was early summer again, the frost was gone, and the hills were green. Branding was over, and it would be a few weeks before haying started. She invited herself along as his caregiver. She had little riding experience, so she got a quick lesson in horseback riding. Missouri was reluctant, but everyone, including Megan and his parents, told him his days of traveling alone were over. Having a companion was a good idea. During that week of riding and camping without leaving the Circle Bar, they turned off their phones and grew closer. They became intimate and were engaged when they returned. Megan knew when the couple left for the week that she was now completely out of Missouri's life, except as a co-worker and co-parent. She then started to see Butch as her next and hopefully last love. Over time, Miss Missouri was joined by two half-brothers from her dad, the legendary man for Missouri and Jane, and two half-sisters from her mom and Butch. She was a great and smart big sister and friend to all. Bill and Connie were treated as grandparents to the group. The movie was a success, and the only credit to the original story was a small note on the screen stating it was based on the life of Kelly Free. It appeared so quickly in the credits that few even noticed it. The success led to a couple more movies, including one about how redemption and renewal happened. That last one was a tearjerker. Kelly Free invested in the Circle Bar, and his relationship with Bill and Connie remained strong until they passed away at very old ages. Arrangements were made with the APR and Jane Free to ensure a medical helicopter was available anytime they needed a quick ride to the hospital, so they never felt the need to move. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.